But what's the flip side of that? What's the hardest part of your job today that somebody from outside of the operation might not fully grasp and appreciate?
Right. So this is something when I'm training managers and I'm training, team members, I always tell them in this industry, the only predictable thing is that it's unpredictable. So you almost have to go into every day, and it's kind of a weird mindset. Sure, you want to be positive. Sure, you want to say, hey, today's going to be a great day, but don't be naive. Something's going to go wrong at some point. You're going to have your walk-in at one of your locations, your refrigeration unit goes down, the ice machine is on the fritz. And right when you're working on that and calling in service, I don't know, your HVAC unit goes down at your other location, or a bunch of line cooks call out and you have to rearrange. So the difficult part, I would say, is being able to pivot on the fly and being able to trust your decisions. Because sometimes what's worse than making a decision is making no decision at all.
Hi, welcome to Deep Current by Oceans. I'm your host, Kaylor. And remember, this is the show built for people who actually run operations in hospitality and the leaders that make everything possible behind the scenes. Today, I'm joined by Pierre Larson. He's the Director of Operations at Mandara Hospitality Group. Welcome to the show, Pierre.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Pierre, the first time we met, you described your career as a little bit unorthodox. I mean, I know that you didn't quite pursue hospitality first. It kind of found you. Can you tell us more about that?
I mean, I find that a lot in hospitality. It kind of captures you, sucks you in, and then you can't leave in a good way. But no, I originally from Washington, D.C., and after college, I went to Los Angeles to pursue an acting career. And I always joke that I was such a talented actor, I was able to convince a restaurant owner that I would actually be a reasonable manager. I started getting bartending gigs and serving and things like that to make ends meet. But then I had an opportunity to become a restaurant manager. And a couple months later, I was promoted to general manager. And at that moment, I was like, you know what? I can make a career out of this. And then I really started investing in my career growth. That took me to Washington, D.C., back home. And then again, back to California. From D.C., I was transferred to San Diego, then Los Angeles again, and then Austin, Texas, and then Asheville, North Carolina, where I've been for about 6 years now.
Tell me a little bit more about what your day-to-day looks like now.
My day-to-day is a lot different than it used to be as a director role where you're managing multiple locations. Previously, my day-to-days were, running, the floor, running service. My day-to-days now are really more focused on reviewing previous days, previous trends, and then also trying to look in my crystal ball and look into the future to see what kind of trends are coming through the pipeline. So, I'd say the days typically start with reviewing notes from the previous day or the previous few days, looking at seeing what happened, what was successful, what was not successful, take that information, adjust what you can, move forward, and turn those into wins. And when I say move forward, a lot of my day-to-days are looking at, like I said, sales projections, labor projections, trying to get ahead of it, because in this industry, if you wait until the problem rises to the surface, you're already too late.
Totally. But tell us about the scale of the operation. How big is it? How many people are you dealing with on a daily basis? What does your team look like? Anything to paint us that picture of what Mandara or your role in Mandara entails today?
Okay, well, we have two restaurants, one that's been around for about 16 years now. That's the original location. And another one that just opened this last October. We have we're just above the threshold of 100 employees. Interacting with teams in two separate restaurants is definitely a unique experience, because even though you're one company, different restaurants, there's just kind of a different vibe. There's a different culture in each one, just based on the individuals who are surrounding each other. Typically checking in with the chef team and checking in with the front of house leadership team. That is a big thing for me, is one-on-ones. Sometimes it's just a casual conversation and it doesn't even have to be relevant to what you're doing on the day-to-day. It's more about engaging socially. Part of this industry is the human element, which is so important to me. So why does it have to stop at just the guests coming through the door? Hospitality is between everybody, in between your peers. And yeah, I like having sit downs, one on ones, and just kind of catching people up on what I've been doing, and have them give the opportunity to catch me up on what they're doing.
Great. So this is an interesting one. You mentioned you've just opened a second location in October, which means the past 6 months for you probably have been quite different from previously, right? And people would figure, hey, new location, twice the work, right? I know it's not a one-to-one relationship there. It's probably way more intrinsic and complicated than that. Can you tell me how your role changed once this happened?
Yeah, so before getting the place open, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this. It's not like you go into a restaurant space, turn off the lights, total blackness, turn it back on, boom, you've got a beautiful restaurant. No, there's so much more involved in it. And it's kind of crazy. Every opening I've ever done, I always say to myself, next time I'm going to need more time, because inevitably something's going to happen. So what's really unique about openings is you've got what we call the critical pathway. You spread everything out of what needs to be accomplished, who needs to accomplish them, and then in what order. Because the interesting thing you run into is, before you can get to, step 3, step 4, you need step 1 and step 2 done. And if something delays step 1, then step 2 is delayed, so on and so forth. So I found myself, as my career grows, if you want to call it that, doing a lot more analytics, doing a lot more meetings, doing a lot more office work, doing a lot more spreadsheets, and really there's something fascinating about it. It is a little different. One thing that I do miss about, my previous responsibilities is interacting with all the guests on a day to day, because quite frankly, I'm behind the scenes at this point in my career. So I do miss that. But the exciting part is being able to make an impact on what the restaurant's going to look like further on down the line. I could give you an example. Putting together something as simple as the floor plan and where the table numbers are, where the seat numbers are. And you take that time and you try to make it perfect, because you don't want to be that guy that down the line someone's like, "Who's the idiot who came up with this?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm the idiot." So you really want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, but also it's exciting to have an impact on the future, and that's what keeps me really engaged.
You paint a very appealing picture of that role, but I imagine it's got to have its hardships and also its exciting parts. So let's talk a little bit about both. What's the part of the operation that you're currently the most satisfied with?
I can't stress this enough. It's the interaction with helping somebody, coaching them and mentoring them and watching them grow, whether that's into a new role, whether that's being more efficient in their day to day, or re-engaging them, because sometimes, not everybody operates linear. Sometimes there's peaks and valleys, even on job performance, or even your own mental health. So it's really, really exciting for me to sit down with a team member, say, "Hey, where are we at? Where can I help you?" Apply that help, and then watch them grow. Really, just, I don't want to sound cliche, but it's just personally satisfying to give somebody the tools to help them along the way, and then watch them flourish. It really, really is exciting.
Totally. But what's the flip side of that? What's the hardest part of your job today that somebody from outside of the operation might not fully grasp and appreciate?
Right. So this is something, when I'm training managers and I'm training, team members, I always tell them, in this industry, the only predictable thing is that it's unpredictable. So you almost have to go into every day, and it's kind of a weird mindset. Sure, you want to be positive. Sure, you want to say, "Hey, today's going to be a great day," but don't be naive. Something's going to go wrong at some point. You're going to have your walk-in at one of your locations. Your refrigeration unit goes down. The ice machine is on the fritz. And right when you're working on that and calling in service, I don't know, your HVAC unit goes down at your other location, or a bunch of line cooks call out and you have to rearrange. So the difficult part, I would say, is being able to pivot on the fly and being able to trust your decisions. Because sometimes what's worse than making a decision is making no decision at all. And if you need to pivot and adjust just to get through the day, it's going to get worse and worse if you're just sitting on your hands and not taking action. However, that gives you the opportunity, and this is another thing I like to coach people. If you have to pivot, you have to do something to change, to adjust, to get through the day or the week, the month, what have you, and you find out you made a mistake and it just didn't work out the way you anticipated. That's actually kind of a good thing, because mistakes are beneficial if you learn from them and grow. Now, if you repeat the same mistake over and over again, obviously there's a different issue. But what I'm really getting at in this is anything that potentially goes wrong, which it will, use it as an opportunity to learn how to prevent it from next time or from happening again next time and what you did to solve it and making sure that you really digest it when you hope to, when you potentially encounter that again.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine you don't hope to encounter that again, but it does. It does happen.
I actually have a binder that we keep in the office of anything that has already gone wrong and what we've done to correct it. And we keep it in there. So just in case, and that's not for you, that's for the next person. Something happens, the Wi Fi goes down. What do you do? What do you do? And I don't know about the language of this show. I don't know if you need to bleep me out, but we call it the oh shit binder because something
You're
happens. You go,
fine.
shit. And you go, oh, let me consult the binder that says oh, shit. And then you open it up and you're like, ah, this walks me through how to fix any issue. The
Right.
rule is though, if you have an oh shit moment and you fix it, you have to update the binder and put it in.
Right. No beliefs necessary in this show. I mean, we're here for that raw perspective. So you're totally good there. But you're giving me a lot to talk about here, and everything that we've discussed in the past few questions that I made to you, as I try to grasp what you're dealing with, what your operation looks like. I mean, let's take the conversation into a bit of a deeper level. Because I like to challenge your mindset on a couple of things. Not challenge your mindset, rather get your specific perspective of why things work that way, and at the same time get your expertise on the ones that I know our listeners will value the most. So with that in mind, let's talk about staff for a moment, because it's clear to me that you are very focused on making sure that you're building a positive culture. It's almost as if from hearing you respond, you hope that they can see this and that comes across. But hospitality is an industry with a very high turnover rate. I mean, last I read, 70 to 80%, something like that on a yearly basis is about the average. Doesn't necessarily mean that's your case, but that's where the industry is kind of at. And I wonder, right? I mean, what are you doing to mitigate that? And then how are you operationalizing what you can't mitigate?
Sure, sure. I mean, it's interesting because across different platforms of hospitality, like I know fast food, the turnover rate is like 130 or something. Like you're not getting somebody to last the whole year. Turnover is definitely an issue for consistency and performance for your restaurant. It's beneficial to keep the same people, keep them trained, keep them engaged. And I use that word purposely, engaged. Staff engagement is a big deal because you want to treat your team as human beings that you're all together. And if you notice, I call them a team. Everybody, we are a team, and it's not a cliche just terminology. It's keep your team engaged. Now, how do you do that? Plenty of different ways. But I find really leadership comes down to getting to know them. I've worked at places before early on in my career where I just felt like a number. I was part of a group and I didn't feel like I really mattered. And then what ends up happening is you're just clocking in, clocking out, and you're not engaged. You don't really care about the business. You care about what you're getting and you're benefiting. And that's not the team mentality. So when I got into leadership and management, I remember saying to myself very specifically, I will not be one of those operators. I want to try to be one of the others where people want to work for you. People want to work hard. And to answer your question, there's no science to it really. It's finding the right people. So when I interview, I can have somebody who I'm interviewing who has the most impressive resume in the world. But if they're culturally kind of falls flat and they're not really kind of vibing in what your overall goal is, it's probably not a good long term solution. On the other hand, if you find somebody who has a very engaging personality and you have that kind of, unspoken, intangible click, that's the person you hire for because you can train them up to do the things that everybody else needs to do. But you can't train them to be positive. You can't train them to be engaging. But again, to engage, you have to have the conversations.
Absolutely. So let me try to drive this into more of the tangibles, because I mean, obviously, culture is very important, but I want to understand a little bit more about how you make sense of what goes on day to day. Because both to make sure that the operation stays profitable and that the people are happy. I mean, nobody wants to work in an environment that's chaos constantly, and that's
Mm.
kind of up your alley, right? So tell me about what a typical morning looks like. I mean, when you and your team, and I say your team, I mean, again, you've been using that term. I mean, that could be your closer management team or the broader team, depending on how you do it. But when you're trying to look at where the operation stands, what's working, what's not working as well as you would expect. What systems are you in? Are you all bringing manual sheets and reports? Do you have automated tools that tell you where things are at? What gives you a real time picture? What requires somebody to come with that report? Tell me more about that.
Right. So if you're talking specifically about, the financial health and the performance of the business, the first thing you do, or the first thing I do, is you got to review the numbers. And I know it seems monotonous, and hence why I have to wear glasses these days, because if I'm looking at numbers all day, I'm going to be cross-eyed. So I had to get a prescription. A lot of times what you want to do is you're looking at trends, okay? You can't just take one day. You can't look at, oh, yesterday, that was a good day. We had really high sales. You have to then take the next step. We had really high sales. Why? What drove that? How do we replicate it? And then you look at, okay, what was our labor like? Were we overstaffed? Were we understaffed? How do we support that? And then you go back, not just yesterday, not the day before, maybe last week, last month. If you have enough data like our original location, last year, the year before, whatever it may be, and try to find and try to see what stands out. And what I mean by that is what is selling, what items are selling, what items are not selling. Okay, what is the reason for that? Are we having too much waste? It's almost like you take everything from a data standpoint, looking through our POS, our point of sales that gives us our analytics, and you look at the big picture and say, what's moving, what's not. Really, again, it's not even about the money you make, it's about the money you keep at that point. We can dig deeper into that in terms of trimming operational costs. But
Mhm.
really, from a day to day, the first thing is just review, find out action steps to correct any things that you could have improved on, then look to the future.
I definitely want to dig deeper in, and I'll take you up on that in a moment. How do we cut down from the bottom line and push the top line? All that definitely goes into the conversation. While we get there, when something unexpected happens during the operation, like a system goes down, I heard you say a couple of things like somebody called because there is suddenly an influx of guests, for example. Any of those things that you can't predict, how quickly do you know about it? And how does the response work?
Well, I mean, it depends on how quickly I know about it. If I'm on site at one of the locations, I know about it immediately. Response works, at least for me individually, it kind of works like this. The very first thing you have to do, and this is going to sound cliche, but it is, maintain your composure, because you're the one who's basically trying to get everybody else not to panic. And if they see panic on your face, it's going to be very difficult to lead people and have them not panic. And then if there's panic on their face, that's going to translate to the guest, and so on and so forth. So the first thing, maintain composure, be calm, and find out how to most efficiently make that adjustment. I always tell and try to coach my team about the duck on the water analogy about leadership, where if you see a duck that's on a lake and they're swimming by, they look very, very calm. But if you go under the water, you see their feet are going real
Mhm.
fast. So you want to be the duck. Internally, if you're freaking out, that's okay. But you have to maintain that composure. Then you follow the steps. If you need to consult your oh shit binder, great, because you've been through it before, you already have your steps. If not, you just have to pivot. Oftentimes, you make the pivot. The very next step from that isn't just charge right in, communicate. Let the whole team know this is what's happening. This is how I'm going to address it. This is the end result I'm looking for. Do you have any questions? Do you need my support in anything? Let's knock this out.
I hope you're ready for a curveball here because I did tell
Good.
you I was going to challenge you a little bit. The oh shit binder sounds incredible. I actually think there's probably 100 operators out there that have their own oh shit binders in their office. What happens if you lose the oh shit binder tomorrow?
Well, then you start a new oh shit binder, and the first thing you do is write down what happens when you lose your oh shit binder. Oftentimes, if you're blessed to have less turnover, you can consult the people that have been through it before and say, hey, when this happened and this happened, how did you fix it? Because again, let me reinforce the main purpose of that binder is not for you individually to go, how did I fix that last time? It's for the next person. So they don't have to do trial and error. They don't have to fail a bunch of times to find the right solution. So really that's it. You reach back in your old bag of tricks and find out who updated and who did what. But then again, it's 2026. Maybe make them digital,
There you go.
have a
There
digital
you go.
go.
That's yeah, I mean, that's probably a good time to start thinking about, digitalizing into oh shit binder 2.0 EXE or something.
Right, but then the
Sometime in the near
robots will
future.
take over and then I'll lose that too. So I'm pretty old school. I like to have it printed in my hands just because, hey, I'm a middle-aged man now, so I'm beyond the new things. I don't trust teenagers and the music I can't stand anymore. So I'm officially old. So I have to print things out.
I totally get the feeling. I have my own notebooks here, but that leads me to a question though. I mean, what else in your operation do you think is still a little bit too manual, and what have you been able to modernize, and what's currently in the systems that you sit behind every day?
So, I mean, that's an interesting question because everybody works differently, So, what works for me and what works for other people? A lot of people on my team, they're not on laptops. They're taking notes on their phones and they're using apps and doing all that like right then and there. And they're the younger generation. If I print something out, they're going to look at it and probably try to scan it onto their phones to look at it digitally. I'm the exact opposite. But for an example, if I physically print out the floor plan and then I manually draw the server sections. That's the, I'm just a creature of habit. That's the way I do it. Whereas there's some younger generations that'll just look at our reservation system called Open Table and go, oh, and just set it up that way.
Mhm.
I'm not saying one's better than the other than if it works for you, it works for you. I have, some chefs literally will print out their order guides and check mark, check mark, check mark. Whereas other ones will have it on the phone and go, that way. So it's really what works best for you. But I would imagine because I'm becoming more of a dinosaur, it's only a matter of time before people aren't really printing anything other than menus.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. Some of the best leaders I've worked under have similar instincts, and they still use brick and mortar tools and old school tools. But at the end of the day, I mean, you did just bring up a couple of things like Open Table, and I heard you before saying like POS. So you do have those systems.
Hmm.
So let me ask you, which ones are you currently aware of that are fundamental to the operation today?
Well, I mean, the POS systems, obviously, that's a no-brainer. The reservation system, it depends on what operation you're actually doing. For a fine dining restaurant that we operate, obviously the reservation system is super important. But there's a lot of operations out there that don't even really necessarily need that. And make no mistake, each one of these comes with a cost. So when I was talking about, not the money you make, the money you keep, sometimes you might have to reevaluate what's actually working for you. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the cost I'm spending for the POS system, for the reservation system, is that returning? If I'm going to spend on it, am I going to make on it? If not, what am I doing? But also efficiencies, because call it what it is. Labor is getting more and more expensive. So if you can cut down on the time of certain tasks, that alone is a win. Not to say you want to automate everything again, because I'm afraid of the robots taking over. Evaluating the efficiency, like I said, and utilizing the technology. What that means to me is, again, reviewing reports. And I tell you, once you go down that rabbit hole of like your POS system and you start adding filters here and there, it's amazing what you can discover. But you got to be cautious because if you don't like set a timer, you can blink and it can be, 10 hours
Mhm.
later and you're still diving into the tiniest little detail to a granular level. But at least you have the capability to pretty much discover almost anything if you have enough time and knowledge to play around with the report functions.
Absolutely. And this is turning out to be quite a controversial take. I have, I host many people in hospitality, and the census, there's really no census. I mean, when it comes to tools and technology, I've interviewed people who have tools or 10 tools to do very unique specific things. Some people have less tools, but interconnected. Others have three tools, and the rest is very, old school. There is a mix of how people do these things in the industry. And I can't help but wonder if what you say, I mean, is it really that unique to every specific location and restaurant? Or is there a compromise where, yes, part of it is unique to the operation, but also there are some things that we should start to find ways to make efficient and consistent across the industry? What is your take on that?
I understand what you're saying. When I said different opera, I was talking about different styles of service. Like if there's a
Mhm.
counter service or a place it's a coffee bar or a place where you're just going to go get a sandwich. Do you need reservation systems? That's what I was talking about. But to your point, the back end integrations that your POS system has. It's fun to find out what integrates because there's a lot out there where you can connect. But here's an example I can use for us. We have our scheduling platform that integrates with our POS, which integrates with our reservation system. So at any given time, again, you could find out information from one to the other and it just pulls data and digests it. So for the scheduling system, it's great because you can look at the projected sales you're trying to schedule and it tells you what your labor percentage is before you post your schedule. From the reservation side of things, it's really kind of neat when you see a server, let's say they're at the table and they're updating the status of the guest, like, oh, they're on dessert or they just paid their check. The people that are looking at the reservation system automatically know that that's the status because they're integrated. It's really kind of interesting to see those integrations. Quite frankly, I'm not sure how much more integration. I mean, at what point is it going to get so everything's all connected? And then you're like, what do we do here? What are we looking at? But in my experience, having those three connected is definitely the way to go. But I could be wrong. I've got a lot to learn. I'm still learning.
Yeah, I mean, so am I. So am I here. But honestly, that makes a lot of sense. And that's exactly the point that I'm making. I mean, at which point is too many tools too much? And, it probably has to do with how much value you're getting from each one, why you're paying for it. Because, like you said, each one comes with a cost, right? But so I mean, I think you were giving me the impression that a lot of is done through pen and paper. Clearly, that's the case for day-to-day operations. I mean, your operation is still modernized from what you're describing, and there are things in that modernization that I'm very fascinated and curious about. For example, pre-arrival windows. But before we get to that, how much of your traffic would you say is reservations versus walk-ins, for example?
It's kind of funny you say that. We have a lot more at our downtown location, which is our original location in downtown Asheville. It's almost all reservations. We fill up very, very quickly. And the reason why I say this is interesting. So we have, people that work for our marketing department. And there was a gentleman who we had hired to kind of help us out. And he was stressing Google ads and talking about all these Google ads. And we gave a budget. And I was really skeptical because it was a couple $1,000s. I'm going, why are we spending a couple $1,000s a month just on putting the ads out there? And I went into a meeting with him very, very skeptical, almost like, hey, prove me wrong here. He proved me wrong really quickly because he pulled up all these analytics and pie charts and stuff. And maybe I was mesmerized by the colors. I don't know. But it really showed that the return on investment was worth it. And I never would have known had I not asked. It's crazy when he was saying, okay, this particular month where it was 2,000, we did this and it reached this many. And we know that this person made a reservation based on that ad because the flow through from here. And then because that's integrated with our reservation system, which is integrated with our POS system, that guest spent this amount. Let's put the filters in. And next thing you know, you're spending $2,000 on ads, but you're generating $12,000 in sales based on just those ads in 1 month. And then you go, okay, that's worth it. But you got to find the very specific people who know how to crack the code. And that's why we hired that guy.
I mean, it's all connected. Like you said, it's if you're not you could be focused on what's going on within the operation. But for example, I've asked this question before to other people who may not have such a strong grasp on what happens before people arrive. That is why I threw that there, the pre-arrival window. I mean, there is the moment that the person learns your restaurant exists or knows that you're available and you have space for them. There is the moment they decide to book, and then there's the moment they're sitting at the table. So how do you leverage all of those moments that happen before they're even through your door? Do you do anything with that time? Or is it more like marketing deals with this? We just get them to book and then we take care once they arrive?
Well, it's a little bit of both. So when I said day to day is my reviewing what's happened in the past couple of days, but then also looking to the future. Part of that is always being prepared because you never know. For instance, and I can just use an example. Right now, I'm at one of the restaurants and I'm sitting in the private dining room. Now, do we have anything booked for the private dining room today? No. Does that mean that we don't set it up and anticipate and expect it to be booked? No, you always want to be prepared. That's what I'm getting at. So the pre-arrival is not really based on individual. It's based on, I am going to be prepared and I'm going to anticipate the busiest night ever. Make sure everything is ready to go. It's almost like that mindset of, Hope for the worst, but hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And really, that's all about the pre arrival. I mean, if you look at your reservations, and this never happens, but if you're like, oh, I only have 20 people coming in, does that mean you're only going to set up for 20 people? No, the whole dining room has to be perfect. Everything has to be perfect. It's about the details. So, really, it takes the guesswork out of the pre arrival when you're always prepared.
Yeah, that is true. But at the same time, for example, if we think creatively, some people, for example, in the pre-arrival I book, they send me like the specials or a menu so that I can browse through it. It cuts down the server's time once I'm sitting there. For example, that's just one of the many things that you or operators sometimes do with pre-arrival windows. Others don't really do much with that time, which is also fine. But I was curious about what happens. I mean, if I book right now? What can I expect from them from now until I'm actually there at the place?
Well, I mean, first you'll get a confirmation email, text, and then a reminder previous day, which is all again, that's the robots. We preset that, so that automatically
Mhm.
goes out. And if there is a special event, let's say it's Easter brunch, it's Mother's Day, whatever, we tailor messages for those confirmations to let them know what to anticipate. Other than that, because we do change our menus quite frequently seasonally, or if the chef goes finds some really fresh great produce, we'll make a special, things like that. We like to handle that when they're in the space, and then let the human interaction go from there. Occasionally, if we've got something really exciting, we have our social media team post stuff out. But in terms of the pre-arrival stuff that you're talking about from making the reservation, we don't lean too heavily on that. We get them in the door and let them
Mhm.
feel. We try to make as much human happen as possible.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So the other thing that I'm always curious about is the returning guests, right? Because that's also, I mean, when we think about what happens outside of the day to day operation, knowing who are your best guests, when they're coming in, what they like to order, is that something you feel you currently have a really good grasp on?
For sure, for sure. In fact, our reservation system really has profiles for all of our guests. You could even click on somebody and see how much they've spent in your restaurant ever since they've been in your system, the frequency of their visits, their last visits. You can update notes in there with their preferences. We've got regulars at our original downtown location that come every Saturday at 5:15. They sit at table number 3. If the vent is, which is close to the table for air conditioning, turn the vent off because they're going to ask for that. And so you could really dial in and know. The important part of that is there was a Gallup poll done a number of years ago. I'm sure it needs to be updated now, but when I read it, it determined that the number one reason people return to restaurants isn't even the food and beverage or service. It's recognition, because the hospitality component is how you make people feel. And if they're recognized, and even if it's just, hey, great to see you again, that goes a long way. Now, once you start getting to know their names, hey, how's your family doing? And now you've got the win, because those people are paying your electric bill.
Yeah. Well, Pierre, let's try to quantify that. Do you think the leveraging something like that, leveraging the returning guests, is that putting points into your NPS? Or is that putting more points into your revenue margins because now all of a sudden you can expect higher occupancy? Like, why do you do that? Why do you bother to take care of the returning guests, for example? Beyond, of
Well,
course, the experience, I mean, and the passion for the industry, but and
well,
that's aside.
truthfully, there's a multitude of reasons. I mean, obviously, you could break it down from just like the hospitality gene. You just want to see the same people, you want to make them happy. There. You want to take that and call it what it is. They're spending in your place. Okay. So you obviously want to take care of them, and because they're taking care of you. So there's that top line part of it too. There's also the unspoken kind of behind the scenes part of it, which is a component of marketing. If you've got another part of the Gallup poll, if a guest has a perfect experience at a restaurant, statistically, they tell like 2 to 3 people. If they have a
Okay.
horrible experience, they tell like 9 or 10. So you almost have to leverage that. So it's a marketing thing. If you have the repeat people, you blow them away every single time. They're going to tell other people, and you get the opportunity to wow them. And then they tell people and they tell people, and it kind of grows organically. Funny enough, if a guest comes into a restaurant for the first time and they have a perfect experience, I think the return rate is maybe 42%. If they come a second time and have a perfect experience, that goes to maybe 44%, not really moving the needle. If they come
Okay.
a third time and have a perfect experience, their return rate after that jumps to like 75 to 77%.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So you really, again, you're fighting kind of an uphill battle, but it really, when I say always be prepared, always have everything perfect, that's one of the reasons why, so that you can really almost turn it into a machine at that point. If you're
Mhm.
making everybody happy, wowing everybody every single time, sure makes my job easier when I'm looking at profit and loss reports because we're boosting top line. I mean, it's just the nature of it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly where the conversation shifts to which part of that is organic. Like you have great people that just happen to have excellent customer service and they're hitting those numbers. And now you can predict that a X percent of the guests that you have will now turn into returning guests and they'll, come with this cadence and then generate this much revenue. Like you can actually assign so many numbers to that. I mean, but
Mhm.
in your mind, what part of it's organic and what part can you systematize to an extent through the pre-arrival window work, through proper staffing and scheduling, through the marketing tactics that you mentioned? And now it's a big question. So, you know,
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can try to predict. Now think of in the beginning when I say the only thing you can predict is that it's unpredictable.
mhm,
So you can use your analytics for scheduling purposes and your projections and whatnot. But in my mind, at least, I almost hope that everything is organic and it grows organically because that's the human element of it. Numbers are numbers, people are people. And being able to create the environment and make people feel good and then you in turn feel good, that's the kind of growth you look for. But let's not be naive, it's the future now, so you have to lean into the analytics and the predictability. But you are right, you get to a point where you can put almost a dollar amount to every little thing you do, and if you don't review it on the daily, you're going to miss out on some opportunities there, that's for sure.
totally. So let's pivot just for a moment because I want to make sure that we also cover this part that is big in your specific case, which is F&B, everything like the reality of F&B. And that's again one of the biggest gaps between operators knowing what's actually happening in real life versus what they see and on the paper is F&B. With things, for example, inventory ordering is a big one. I mean, I've spoken with many people who still largely leave it up to the chef's judgment and historical feel to make orders, as opposed to being demand and historic driven, right?
Mhm.
What do you feel is your case? Is there a particular system or process that you apply?
Yeah, I mean, we have a standard operating procedure for that, for inventory and things like that, stuff that we want to bring on, stuff that we want to take off and whatnot. But before we go live with anything, whether that's food or that's beverage, we review it and we break it down. We break down the cost analysis and then we kind of say, okay, this is what the total dish is gonna cost us. What is our food cost that we're shooting for? Do your formula. This is what we should price it at, but also, there's some science to it too. Where do you place it on the menu? Because people's eyes read differently. Where on the you see the most benefit. Put your most profitable items on the menu in certain areas to drive revenue. You could dive deeper into that as well. But inventory specifically, we don't leave it up just to the chefs. We have a collaboration on it, and it's the same thing with wine and with spirits and beverage and whatnot. You really just the whole team kind of talks it out and kind of go from there. Again, it's a teamwork environment. It's not one person says this is the way, this is what we're doing. It's everybody saying, "Hey, what are we doing? Why? How?"
Absolutely. Do you feel like food costs, like how many points above the food cost, happen each month on a week by week basis? What's the level of predictability on something like that? How many points does your food cost go above where you want it to be? Or do you feel like that's super efficient? I mean, could be
I
anything.
mean, there's different fluctuations. I don't think we ever really, you set your target. You want to be aggressive, obviously, for profitability purposes. So if you set your food cost at maybe 28 to 29% in there, there will be months that maybe that creeps into the 30s,
Mhm.
maybe 30.5. But anything above that, you go, hold on, time out. What's happening here? We need to make sure we're getting back on track. But there's other times where it reports lower, and you go, hold on. And then you do your day. Oh, we got a real great deal on our proteins from our purveyor this month, or you find the reasons why. And that's really, the name of the game. After a certain period of time, you end up kind of being a detective. Now, whether you're trying to find something that needs improvement or whether you're trying to find something that is a win, when you become that detective, you go in. But to your point, you could pretty much predict as long as you're keeping track of the inventory. Your biggest culprit will be the waste if people don't take it seriously, or sometimes portion size can get out of control. And next thing you're like, why is food cost so high? Our purchases are the same, our sales are the same. It must be down to how much are you putting on the plate? Is that higher than what we've priced it out for? Little things like that you can kind of dial in and adjust.
Absolutely. For example, I mean, is it, do you often have to 86 a menu item, for example, like, because you're out of a particular ingredient that wasn't, that, you didn't have enough to serve that specific time of the day? Is that like a common issue?
Not very common for us anymore. When you first open and you haven't really gotten your flow yet, sure, it happens. There's other restaurants I've worked at that, yeah, it happens, but not super often. Because if it does happen often, then you've obviously, there's a trend, there's a pattern. What's
Mhm.
going on and how do you adjust it? Because not only are you disappointing guests, it shows if it's consistent and you're running out of, especially the same thing over and over again, it shows that there's no action steps for what's been happening, but also take that opportunity to look at what's not moving. Do you see what I'm saying? If you have an item that is consistently being 86, okay, are you ordering properly? Or, hey, maybe it's so popular that no matter how much I order, it's going to sell out. Is there opportunity there to either adjust prices or really hit volume that way? But
Mhm.
also, if you're going to start researching, look at the stuff that's not moving, that's not selling. So anytime you see something that's six, red flag, let's go find out. Take that moment if you're digging in anyway. What's not 86ing at all? What's not even coming close? Is that taking up space in my walk-in? Is that taking up space on my menu, which is valuable real estate where I could sell something else?
Mhm.
So it's all encompassing when you really look into it.
Mhm. It's amazing how much you can unpack from perspectives like this. I mean, to somebody like you, that's probably now you're very acquainted with something like that. Somebody new to the industry might not even picture the impact and envision the impact of something like 86 in an item, which, I mean, leads me to the question, what would that actually cost to you today? If you know you have to 86 something, what does it do to the rest of the evening? What's the cost in guest experience, in the lost sale? What's really the impact there in the waterfall?
I mean, it's difficult to come up with a dollar amount or even a percentage. When I was saying earlier, wanting to have that human element with your guests and having things grow organically, that is a big way to disappoint people if they're not getting what they're expecting, right? It's a level of disappointment. I can't really necessarily put a dollar amount on it, but it does have an impact on the guest experience. Now, when I broke down the first visit or first perfect visit 44, second or
Hmm.
42, second 44, third 77. Well, if they're on their second visit, something's 86, not a perfect experience, you're most likely going to miss out on that 77 return.
Pierre, by the way, that 42, 44, 77, where is it that come from? Is that from a particular?
That's the same outdated Gallup poll. So it's probably it should be updated. I read that poll years and years ago. I just had one of those days where I was just nerding out on analytics and just trying to discover the why. And I read it and it was actually eye opening. It jumped off the page. I was like, no wonder it's so paramount to strive for perfection every single time because it generates into tangible dollars.
So, Pierre, now that you're managing two separate properties, the visibility and the analytics that you were just discussing, I imagine, are a huge aspect of your role. You did say it yourself that now you're spending much more time in the back end, like behind the scenes, making sure everything is performing well. When performance does dip at one or the other location, call it occupancy or reservations or guest satisfaction or even the food cost that we just talked about, how quickly does that show up in a way that you can do something about it and jump in and action it? Is it something immediate? Does it wait for a weekly report? Is it a monthly review?
Well, it really depends on the individual thing you're looking into. For instance, labor is the low hanging fruit. Okay. So if you, and to answer your question for the period of time, you could make pretty quick adjustments. You could even do day of. If you're noticing that sales aren't coming through the way that you had predicted or anticipated or even scheduled for, you could start sending people home, eliminating that hourly labor best you can. If you review the previous day, which is typically the first thing you do in the morning is review the previous day, you can go, maybe we could have scaled back a little bit. You can make adjustments day of, whether that's sending out a message, hey, who wants to take the day off? Or whether that's sitting down with your scheduling manager and going, hey, let's adjust our projections so that we're scheduling accordingly. That's one piece. Another piece, the top line revenue or occupancy, right? For instance, if I go into, let's say, a Friday, Saturday night, and when I'm reviewing our reservations in the morning, not really seeing a whole lot. We've got a lot of room there. Call up your marketing people. Call up your Google Ads guy. Call up and put a blast out there and really throw some content. You can get some things that way. Furthermore, in terms of analytics, we haven't really done this as much as I'd like to, but in those scenarios, you can go to your reservation platform and it does have guest, history, like I've talked about before. And you can run a diagnostic to be like, who hasn't come back in 3 or 4 months or whatever. And then you can send them a message, hey, haven't seen you in a while. Why not come back and really push it that way? So on a day to day, you could do some things. Now, in terms of food cost and beverage cost, you have to obviously wait till your inventory is done. Some places do it weekly. We do ours monthly, but what we like to do so that it doesn't get completely out of is give ourselves a purchasing budget to stay within based on what we're projecting. And then as each week goes by, if we're not hitting our projections, we scale back our purchasing budget so we're not overspending and having things go to waste when we're not getting the top line revenue in. So that's
Mhm.
something you can adjust. But to answer your question overall, certain things you can adjust in the moment, in the hour, other things you can adjust in the day. And then there's other ones you look at in a month. And then if you look at a whole quarter, you can adjust that way, but you don't want to wait that long to make any fixes.
I that's just fascinating because that's where I can't help but think people are doing this to different degrees of success. I mean, some operations probably are able to make those decisions and adjustments that you bring up that sometimes maybe we don't even come up with. Like,
Mhm,
hey, let me look at the returning guest list and figure out that this person hasn't been coming for some reason the cadence changed. It could go a really long way in keeping the list healthy, for example. And those are the things that you can only make those decisions by having the data visible to you and
mhm.
timely also, I would say. So I'm very impressed by that. And we're coming toward the end of our time here, but I want to make sure to I can also ask you a little bit about where you see this going forward. And one question that I always like to ask has to do with your bucket list. I mean, if you could fix something about the way that you, let's say not you are operating, but that the operation is working from the standpoint of systems or interconnectedness or processes, not the external factors that you can control, but something that you know you could do that's there in your list and you just haven't had the bandwidth to get to it. Is there something that comes to mind?
Are you talking industry wide or case specific for my operation?
I would say Mandara, within Mandara and
I
what
see.
you're doing there.
If there's something that could be fixable that is
Yeah.
not external in terms of getting more butts and seats, because I would love to get more butts and seats.
Yeah.
That's really difficult. I would love to lean more. I mean, this is just my own thoughts here. As I was saying, I'm a pen and paper kind of person. I'm old school. I would love to lean more into the capabilities of the analytics and the data that we have at our disposal. Sometimes, and I'll just call myself out. Sometimes I can be very narrow minded, where I'm looking at something very very specific in terms of dialing in and looking at numbers and things like that. Whereas I wish I had it in me a little bit more. I'll work on it, where I could just look at everything and go, okay, what jumps out here? Where do I need to focus my energies? It's almost like you want to take the blinders off at times, but you want to put the blinders on at times. So
Mhm.
really to answer that question more in depth, the systems and the consistency and then learning the hows and then teaching others, I would love to fix that, but that comes with me. That has nothing to do with anybody else on my team. It's just really diving in more of the capabilities and not be such a dinosaur.
I don't think it's a you thing, honestly, Peter. I think it's actually a common one that I hear. You know that because there is that disconnect between running operations in hospitality is such a hands-on by nature type of role. And at the same time, now we have the tools to leverage all of this incredible data and make sense of those things to make decisions, that it's almost inevitable that you are not going to be able to be on top of this all the time if you still
Right.
want to make sure that this is working. So it's a very common one. I honestly, it's not, I don't think it's a you thing, but I think we're headed toward that direction, honestly, as a whole.
Mhm.
Now, where do you see the biggest opportunity for independent operators to compete against the branded chains, the big corporations? Let's talk about things that you believe they can do that will really bring step change stuff, not just incremental improvements.
I mean, that's a pretty broad question, to be honest with you, because there's many different avenues you could take that approach. In competing with with brands or corporate brands, if you will, it's almost like, who's your target market, who's your target audience. If you target the people, a lot of people just are turned off by brands. However, the corporate brands do have a level of consistency to them because it's so structured. So to me, competing is kind of meeting in the middle. You don't want to be so structured where you're just a boring wash, rinse, and repeat. But you don't want to be so on the mom and pop side where you're just flying by the seat of your pants and putting your menu on a chalkboard and just deciding every minute, changing your mind every minute. Another aspect is, it's not just what you're offering to your guests, but it's also what you're offering to your employees. Because a lot of times I hear this a lot. Some people are like, the corporate world and the brands is just not for me because it's too structured, not enough flexibility. Other people thrive in that environment. So again, it goes down to the individual. And to compete, sometimes, and I'll just be transparent, sometimes I have that mindset of, you know what, you guys can have them. Or you do your thing over there, I'm going to do my thing over here. It's not using the term competition. Yes, I get it in a free market capitalist society, but at the same time, I feel business begets business and everybody can kind of grow together. And I'm not trying to steal guests from, a corporate entity. I'm trying to offer them something different, wow them every single time so that they have no need to go anywhere else.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very pragmatic perspective, to be honest. So, before I let you go, Pierre, I always like to conclude with a quick lightning round type of thing. So, I'm gonna throw a few questions at you, but I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. No overthinking, just whatever it feels like it's a natural response. So, tell me in your mind, what's the most overrated thing in hospitality technology, and tools?
The most overrated thing in hospitality technology and tools? Wow. All of them are overrated. Everything, because restaurants and hospitality have been around a lot longer than technology. So I would say technology is kind of coming to support. It's just like a little bonus. And anything bonus is kind of overrated, I think.
That's a very interesting one, a very unique take too. So, what is the system on the flip side of that? What is the system that you currently couldn't run without? You really need.
I mean, the POS system alone, I mean, that's just the simple one because that also not harvest, but that's where we enter the data for our inventory and whatnot.
Mhm.
So if I didn't have a POS system that can tell me my product mix, inventory control, any of that, like I'd be kind of lost.
Okay. Be outside of Mandara, what's the best hospitality experience that you have ever had as a guest? What made it stand out?
Okay. There's a good one. So I worked for a celebrity chef Jose Andres many many moons ago in my career, and I was in Washington D.C. I had just gotten a job working for him, and so I took my family to go dine there, and the executive chef, and keep in mind, they invited me in on a very busy night before I started working for them, just so we could see the whole glitz and glamour, the whole experience. And I gave the menu to the server and said, "You know more than me. Let's do this thing." And they just coursed out everything. They asked if there was anything, dietary restrictions or stuff we just really weren't, that big of a fan of. And we said no. And next thing you know, they send everything. But what really, really stood out, they are getting absolutely crushed on like a Saturday night. I don't know why they invited me in on a Saturday night. They should have sat me on like a Tuesday. But, we order a lamb shoulder and the executive chef himself comes to the table to break it down tableside and serve every member of my family. And I look at him and I say, "Chef, you're so busy." And he says, "You know what? You're worth it." And I was like, wow. And I'll never forget that moment because I was completely blown away. Granted, it was because I worked for the company, but that's neither here nor there.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that sounds like an amazing experience for sure.
Mhm.
One last question now, Pierre. If you were in hospitality, what would you be doing?
If I wasn't in hospitality, oh man, I've tried and it sucks me back in. I don't know if there's a good answer for that. I'd most likely try to be podcasting.
Okay. All right. I mean, I'm glad you enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Pierre, thank you so much. Genuinely enjoyed the conversation. I loved how, I mean, I definitely really, really loved the old school organic narrative, like the essence of the industry that I guess definitely we can lose as we explore what this can look like and how, the ways that we can modernize it as we move ahead. That is still such an integral part of what we're doing and why we're doing it in the first place. So I appreciate that. Pierre, if our listeners want to follow what you're building or you personally or even Mandara Hospitality Group, where should they go?
So people can follow our updates and what we're about at mandarahospitalitygroup.com. So that's the entity that oversees both Pasanas, and maybe hit up our Instagram and see what we're relevant with. And yeah, follow us and join us on our journey.
Thank you so much, Pierre. And thanks everybody for listening to Deep Current. If you are an operator dealing with any of the challenges that Pierre discussed here today or can relate to his experience and want to keep that conversation going, feel free to reach out. You can find us at oceanscall.com. For everybody else, see you next time.